Hey guys, so Toby Hill from Deep Dungeon Games. Some of you guys may know me, some of you may not. We make all kinds of awesome stuff for 5th edition, and we make our own games, and we do all kinds of fun, creative stuff for fantasy games and just in general gaming tabletop fun. So in this video series, we're actually going to be covering the 5th edition classes, which are wonderful and awesome, and they are everything they should be, I think. Now, there may be some discrepancies from, people who have played many different editions, but I have only played, I think, 3.5, and I've played 4th edition briefly, and I've played 5th edition copious amounts, which I absolutely love 5th edition. I know there's some people that hate it, but I completely think that it gives the most reference back to the old school system and everything like that. So we're going to start alphabetically, naturally. We're going to be starting with the Barbarian, and I feel like the Barbarian is one of the best classes in the entire series of classes for 5th edition. I absolutely love them, and they are probably one of the few that I have played. I have played a Barbarian, I have played a Cleric, I have played a Fighter, a Wizard, and that's about all I've played. But, I'm always down to play whatever. I haven't had a chance to play a whole lot. I've done a ton of dungeon mastering, so I don't get to play as much as I would love to. Playing with my guys tonight, actually. We're going to be doing a custom homebrew game, so that's always fun. Anyways, so let's get to the story. So we want to do this from a different standpoint and look at each class from historically as well as how they're played. I think this is important for a number of reasons, because if you don't understand the history, you don't know where you're going, and that's just super important. I think with anything historical, you have to look back at the history of it throughout the entire history of it. And if you're one of those people that like to play one class or maybe just 2 or 3 classes, I think it's quick and easy to find reference material for your character. So a barbarian is a person that is savage or in a primitive state. They are considered to be an uncivilized person. They are a person that without a culture that is normal. They are without refinement that is considered in some way against the grain of everything that is civilized. A few of the common adjectives used with define a barbarian are uncivilized, crude, and savage. So right off the bat, we're looking at, oh, hey, I'm rough and tumble type character. I'm not normal. I'm not what society is considered normal. I am completely different as a whole of what I am. And that's super, super important, right? To understand, because if you're going to play a character or a concept, then I think you really need to play the character or the concept, not get stuck behind, this is what I'm doing or this is what I'm going to do, because there is a social norm to the, what people perceive. And again, there's nothing wrong with playing against the norm or different or changing it up a little bit. There's not a dang thing wrong with that. But I think you got to start with that historical standpoint, so that way it feels like you're playing what you're supposed to, right? So in some ways, I like to think the barbarian as anything or anyone who acts as they will, as they want, at any time or any place, mostly because they do not understand what the taboos or the social norms are. So that being said, it means that, hey, I may not know that it is not okay to flip the table in the keep when I'm upset or when I disagree with something. Maybe that's something your character's family did, It doesn't really matter what the norm or what you think it is. It's just kind of like, what would my character do? And I think that's definitely super important to look at and understand behind every part of it, right? So the word barbarian is originated in ancient Greece, and it was actually intended to be the catch-all for anyone who was not of Greek historical heritage, right? So that includes the Persians, the Egyptians, the Phoenicians. I mean, anyone. If you weren't Greek, you were a barbarian. You were considered this term. And basically, I don't think it's necessarily derogatory in nature, but it was like, hey, you're not from here, you're this. And it was maybe a catch-all term to say, if you're not Greek, you're not of us. So here's the term we're going to give you. So maybe a little bit derogatory in some sense, but I mean it was a name derived from being able to label, but I don't think it was necessarily the label uh, skewed. I think it was more of a label in the sense of like, hey, we're from here, you're from there. We don't know exactly where you're from. You could be this, 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 and this, especially in that region, because if you look at Greece and the area that surrounds Greece, I mean, there's just so many areas that people can differ. And, being from Mesopotamia and that area, I mean, there's just, that was, the where life kind of got the start, so it said. And I mean, there's just so much, branching out from there, and different cultures could be created very quickly. But it was the ancient Romans who, by the original definition, were barbarians themselves, who first transformed the use of the term. It was late in the Roman Empire, the word barbarian came to refer to all foreigners who lacked Greek or Roman traditions. That is saying that they didn't follow the gods of Greek or Roman heritage. So that would be of Greece. That would be like Zeus, Aphrodite. My mind's going blank. Zeus, Aphrodite, Athena, Athena. Sorry, and forgive me if I'm ignorant of some things. So, I just, as you're shooting this stuff, you kind of get stuck behind a rut in your thought process. Anyways, so that transformed into, if you don't follow us, you're a barbarian, right? If you don't follow this culture, this climate, this whatever it is, you are this. And I think it's important to note that, because you as a barbarian should be playing that type of a role, right? You should be, you're a barbarian. You're not just a rage machine. You are culturally different. You are very different, and that's one of the reasons why you play the Outlander and the historicals, or in the 5th edition you play an Outlander type background. And I believe that's actually what's recommended for the quick play for the Barbarian. Actually, let me look real quick, and I believe that is exactly what it is. Outlandish background, or Outlander background. Let me see here. Where's quick build? Yeah, so Outlander background. So I mean, yeah, it says for a quick build, you pick the Outlander background. Again, not saying that's what you got to do, but that's what it says, recommends for you to play, I guess, a historical barbarian type character. So that being said, there was never a single united barbarian group. Many different tribes were included, with the Goths, the Vandals, the Saxons, the Huns, and many more. They were very shifty. They would align together against the Romans at different times, but then they would ally themselves with the Romans at different times. It was very like, okay, what's better for us at this point in time, or how was I offended at what point in time? They are very much that type of person and personality to like shift quickly, because they are people in the moment. They are creatures in the moment. They are very from the heart, from the machine. That they are. They are very emotional people, as much as they're not. You know what I mean? They're easily persuaded when they are. They feel like they have been attacked personally, right? And that's for the whole tribe, right? But anyways, so they would fight with the Romans, against the Romans. Later, scholars would expand the use of the word, writing about the attacks on the cultured civilizations, and even in China and ancient Rome, by external enemies who don't share the civilized tradition or structure. So that means that saying that it was an outside invader, they would say, hey, this is a barbarian clan because they are attacking us because we are not them. So today, the adjective barbaric is most commonly used to describe the act that is either brutal or cruel to the point of savagery, or primitive and uncivilized. While a barbarian is a person who commits such an act that has displayed terrible characteristics. This more general and explanatory negative definition, when compared with either the Greek or Roman sense of the word, illustrates clearly just how far the barbarian has been removed from its ancient roots. So it's been taken from, being a almost a culture You know, you're a barbarian because you are derived from this culture, this area, this thing, and now you're barbaric because of how you act and how you demonstrate yourself personally as an individual, which is good, right? Because we're getting away from that. Hey, you're a barbarian, or you're this because you're part of this group or this culture. No, now you're a barbarian because you're just a terrible person, or you did these terrible things. Which is, I mean, it's good to get away from removing those derogatory meanings and going to a more open term as a person, as an individual, because we are all individuals and we are all people, and we should be defined by our actions, not by who we are or what we are. So let's get into the fifth edition a little bit and kind of define what a barbarian is in fifth edition, right? So a barbarian in fifth edition, kind of going over the overlaying aspects of it, is a different kind of tank from a fighter or a paladin. Instead of tanking a lot with armor, or like the fighter, or like lay on hands with like paladin with combined, where they can either boost themselves or do kind of that combat medic type of thing. They basically tank with their chest, man. They're all there. They're just like, bring it on. I don't care. They solely have the highest hit dice in 5th edition D&D. They have the D12, and even that with the bear totem features, it really helps them completely negate damage entirely. You know what I mean? So that with you can generally get a pretty high AC with being a barbarian if you do it right. But we're not going to get into the mechanics and the actual trying to make it the best, right? You'll laugh off the damage coming your way because you're just that beastly with the rage feature and everything like that, right? And unlike the fighter and paladin, if your image tries to ignore you, you can just take them out, no problem. You can deal damage just as easily as you can take it. So another role the barbarian typically plays is a damage dealer. So they get scaling bonuses to their damage while they rage, as well as easy access to advantage on attack rolls and capstone that literally lets them break the rules on cap stats. It doesn't really matter because, they're that awesome. They're one of the funnest things to play, I think, because there's nothing funner than raging and smashing your way through a hole while ignoring damage is the bear totem, or you could even take half damage if you go down a different route, if that's something you choose. So being a barbarian is just freaking awesome. Let's just say that. So the class features of being a barbarian, they automatically get unarmored defense. So this is like, you get to use your chest as armor, right? I mean, that's just awesome, straight up. It's flavorful. It adds so much potential. It's going from like that whole Game of Thrones type thing where Khal Drogo puts his chest into that sword right before he dies. Unfortunately, through whatever the means are, I'm not going to try to ruin it, but it does happen. And so it's kind of like that feature, right? I mean, that Khal Drogo from Game of Thrones is a very barbaric type animal and creature. He's wild, he's savage, he's a brute in some essence, and he's not cultured to what, say, Daenerys Stormborn is used to, right? So in that idea, he's a barbarian to her, right? In the old definition of it. So it's kind of core to the barbarian identity that the unarmored defense is there. I mean, if you saw a barbarian unarmored and full plate armor, you'd be like, that's not a barbarian. That's a paladin or a fighter, right? Because it's not what you visualize as through like photos and things that you've seen as a player, or through whatever books you may read. The most important feature to a barbarian literally is rage. This is why we play barbarians. And somehow, even though it has lost traditional ability score bonuses, rage has become even more manly. Advantage on strength saves and strength checks. You rage, you're going to break up that door, and no wimpy monk is going to be pushing you back, right? So I mean, that's why you play barbarian, is to be able to rage, right? It gets you that boost, that bonus, that everything you want, while you can basically push through damage. You can push through being destroyed, being whatever it is. You can do that, and you get this at level 1, which is just phenomenal, right? I mean, that's what a barbarian is. You almost have to have that at level 1, because if you didn't, you wouldn't feel like a barbarian anymore, right? So let's move on and go to reckless attack. This reckless attack is essentially your damage dealing. This allows you to basically open yourself up and just go wild and screaming into whatever it is. Basically, you get let me see. You make attacks with advantage, but all enemies that attack you until your next turn have advantage against you, which again is very, very powerful. But if you're raging, you're going to be taking half damage anyways from slashing, bludgeoning, and piercing damage from that non-magical weapons. And depending on which path you go down, can drastically increase. Again, so I mean, that combined with the rage is a devastating tool of being able to take damage and deal damage in the same instance. Danger Sense is another Barbarian feature. So dex saves are very common in 5th edition, from anything from a blast to a dragon's breath to whatever it may be. It's a very common thing that comes into play because you're always going to be trying to dodge, roll out of the way, and move out of the way. But it's a very important thing that I think is got to be noted that without Danger Sense, you're not really a barbarian. It's almost like that spider sense from Spider-Man. I mean, you're kind of like, you just know that something's coming and you're able to almost prevent it, which is super awesome. So you also get extra attacks, and that's really awesome because it gets you to be dealing more damage quicker and faster. You can do more damage than a paladin, ranger, or monk in some instances, and the same stuff applies to you as a barbarian with that rage and that reckless attack. So while you're reckless attacking, I mean, you're constantly getting that advantage, right? So you're building up these attacks, and depending on what type of weapon you have and damage you're dealing, if you got a great axe or a maul or whatever, you're doing, 1d12 or 2d6 or whatever it is. That statistically just raises your rate tremendously. The feral instinct, advantage on initiative checks, that right there is amazing. So right off the bat, you're getting some great advantages to your movement in combat. So I actually love this part because I think it really applies back to that barbarian culture, that barbarian feature and historical aspect, is that you're getting that extra bonus because you're a hunter, you're a warrior, you're that type of person to be able to quickly react to a situation, no matter what the situation is. And that's just what a barbarian is, right? I mean, seriously, it's great. You gotta love it. So even if you don't, you get to act normally during surprise rounds while you're raging. So if you happen to be raging while you're getting snuck up on, while that opponents get a free basically attack round or whatever you want to call it, then you actually get to act normally. So you get to act during their surprise round, which is awesome. Brutal Critical. This is an amazingly flavorful, and it helps to really bring out that kind of I'm a barbarian, hear me roar aspect, right? So not only are you attacking recklessly, raging, now if you do a certain percentage on your dice roll, now you're able to do so much more damage applied on your brutal critical, right? Because you have a 5% more chance of occurring for that critical hit, right? And that in this game can be rule breaking in some aspects. I mean, it can be just you get that extra roll and 19 or 20 and bam, that's 10% of the time you're gonna be rolling that. Well, not quite, but dice rolls are dice rolls, right? But statistically, 10%. Relentless Rage. So you can, by making a DC 10 con save, literally keep fighting even when you die. So not only do you deal damage, do you take damage easily, but yet you don't even die. Like, come on, man. Like, that's just awesome, right? Like, so you're getting beat up and taken out, and next thing you know, you fall down. You're like, nah, I ain't done yet. I'm going for it. I'm not done. You can't take me out. I'm a barbarian. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like the combined feature with the orc. You know what I mean? With that, when they get down, they get back up to 1 hit point. Which again, same thing, but this one's a little different. I don't think you can you just basically fight until your rage ends. So that being said, that can be really, really awesome. So like I said, considering the orcs are not a playable race, the half orcs can do this only once per long rest. So playing as a half orc, which I think the orcs are actually a playable race now, actually. I don't know, I have to look. I don't play orcs, so I'm not sure. So we go on to Persistent Rage. It's certainly a welcomed ability, but it's a removal of the restriction that was only added to this edition. And if you play correctly, you should never end your rage prematurely anyways, unless your DM is intending for that to happen. So, I mean, you can't make everything just be awesome, right? I mean, you try, but it is what it is. So let's move on to Indomitable Might. This is really awesome. It's just one of those abilities that just kind of almost broken. If you roll less than 20 on a strength check, you can take 20 on that check instead. I mean, this is much higher level. You're getting into some of this stuff, which in itself is super awesome. But again, you're looking at these level 15 plus characters essentially, and at that point it's not as broken. At low levels, yeah, it would be a little bit broken, but at this level, nah, because you're fighting legendary monsters anyways, if not multiple legendary monsters, depending on the situation and the fight and the everything, right, and how cruel your DM is. And the last thing all barbarians get is going to be that primal champion, which again doesn't even matter because you gotta be level 20 to be getting stuff like that. So again, it is what it is. So let's go into just the main primal paths of the barbarian. So we're gonna go. You got the path of the berserker, the path of the totem warrior, and that's it. That's the only two, isn't it? So the path of the totem warrior is one of the best, I think. It's different from, say, the path of I'm sorry, we'll cover the path of the berserker first. The berserker I like, but it's not one of my favorites. I don't know, it just feels almost too quickly built. As WotC was pushing this stuff out, they were like, oh, here's everything you need. And I feel like some of it may have been a little bit forced, you know what I mean? But so the level of exhaustions can only be removed one at a time by Greater Restoration spell, which is only available to clerics and druids, and it costs 100 gold to cast and consumes fifth level spell slot. So in game, you're expecting to run into 6 counters a day at all levels. I mean, you're gonna be exhausted, and as a barbarian. But I mean, that's some of the checks and balances, I guess. I just feel like Frenzy was kind of, I don't know, underutilized. I feel like that's kind of like one of the best abilities that some of the other editions have handled better. So, mindless rage, you become a fearless and can't be swayed by charm when it matters most. You can enter inner rage to suppress any fear or charm that is currently on you. An excellent feature. And I think that really just comes into play depending on how you're playing that barbarian, right? So, I feel like if elves can't be charmed anyways, and there's other things that can give you advantage against fear. Again, Berserker's not my favorite, but it's definitely understand why they did it. The intimidating presence, however, is one of my favorite things about the Berserker. It adds so much flavor. It's that really loud shout, and everyone runs away feared because I'm awesome and manly and great, right? Not to say that you have to be manly, you can be womanly too, womanly scary barbarian. But the last thing I believe the Berserker gets is the retaliation, which is the kind of the capstone in essence to that path. And while the path is not my favorite, it's still okay. This is the only feature that I feel is really well done, and unfortunately you get it much later in levels, but it's pretty good. The path of the Totem Warrior, I feel like it's just got so much more flavor. And also, if you haven't noticed, I'm all about more of the playing behind and less of the rules, because that's just how I am. I like the understanding, the playing behind it. It's more so than I like the actual, I don't know, content that is just dry. But that's just me. So the Path of the Totem Warrior is much more like, I'm a spiritual warrior. I am what I am because this is how I was raised. This is what I am. This is my people. This is how I grew up. And one thing that bugs me about the Barbarian in 5th edition is I feel like it was very almost, and they kind of corrected it with like, the Ancestral Guardian, the Berserker, I'm sorry, the Battle Rager, the Storm Herald, and the Zealot. I feel like they've done a good job of like trying to revamp it and add all the extra additional stuff to it. But I just felt like it was almost like either you're the super angry guy or you're the spiritual warrior guy. That's what you got to start with. But I mean, again, they've added some more stuff that I feel like a Barbarian could really easily be. So the Totem Warrior is very much that. I'm a spiritual warrior. I'm a warrior of my tribe, my people. I kind of take this to akin to some of the more American Indian type tribal warriors, to where they're very much inclined to the history of their people and the way they worship and the way they do their things, right? And anyways, so the Barbarian path of the Totem Warrior starts with a Spirit Seeker. Basically, it's a beast sense spell, and you can cast it as a ritual without taking a feat, in both flavorful and ridiculously useful. Speak with animals will be more than likely also have its shining moments in any game. It's the only problem I have with this feature is that the path in general is so perfect for the Outlander Warrior that it almost takes away from everything else. So, and I can go into this pretty deep, but each one breaks down into, the bear, the eagle, the wolf, and all of those aspects. But I think the most important thing to take away is that, depending on how you want to do it, the Barbarian is the character you want to play. If you want to play someone who is misunderstood, who is deep, and who is very capable to do a lot of things. So let's go into the ability scores. So the strength is naturally probably the most important to Barbarian. Literally half of the class features in the Barbarian have to do with strength. You want it to at least be 16 at this level, level 1. So don't make this your dump stat. You need strength. You're going to have to use what you're doing damage with. It's what, your athletics. It's so important to you as a Barbarian. Dexterity, if you're not going to be wearing any type of armor, you should try to have this up because it's going to raise your AC naturally, and dex saves are common anyway, so it's an important feature to have as it is. So get it while you can, and if you're a dex-based Barbarian, then you're doing okay, but I don't know, against the norm. So I just feel like, strength Barbarians are so much more common, and that's just kind of what they do. And Constitution, naturally, you need Con. Get your Con high as possible. I would say your 2 highest stats should be Strength, Constitution, by all means. Intelligence, you're a Barbarian. You don't need Intelligence. You just beat everything to death with your axe. So, nothing saying that you can't have Intelligence, but it's not necessary to you as a statistically saying. Wisdom, wisdom's good. I think wisdom's good in every aspect because perception takes wisdom, and perception is good. Always good. Charisma, if you're gonna have a dump stat, charisma or intelligence is probably okay. There's some aspects that do require charisma as a Barbarian, but only like intimidating presence, but that's really it. Okay, so let's go over the races and what kind of races you can expect to use. Dwarves naturally built to be Barbarians. You get that bonus to Con, you got Dark Vision, advantage saves against poison, and resist to poison damage. So that's obviously a good race. Hill Dwarf, you get that +1 to Wisdom, which is okay, but you get more HP per level, which more HP is always good. And course, that +2 to con. Mountain Dwarf, which is probably, I think, the better way to go for a Barbarian class-wise. You get that +2 to strength along with everything else the dwarfs are getting. You automatically get the armor and things like that, which you don't really necessarily need, but it also helps. So dwarf is definitely one of the best barbarian races to go through. Going to elves, you get that +2 to dex, right? Perception, proficiency, which is hands down great. Advantage saves against charm, immunity, sleep, but as depending on which barbarian you're going with, you can negate that also as well. So, I mean, okay. High elf, no, not really, but high elves gives you nothing that you want as a barbarian. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it. You can make it work. You can play differently. Nothing wrong with that. But ideally, no. Wood elf, you're getting some good stuff there. You get a little bit of faster movement speed, which is good. And maybe you can multi-class or something like that. But really, wood elf's not great. So let's go to halflings. Lucky is good, period. So there's that. I mean, it's just good. So you can get some pretty cool weapons, and being a little crazy halfling barbarian would be awesome. I would call him Shin Splitter, because I'd be smashing into people's shins just because. The advantage saves against being frightened is good, but also you can negate that by being a barbarian itself. I'm not going to go into the different ones. So human, they're always good. You can get that +1 to all your stats, and you automatically get a, depending on which variant you're playing, you play the human variant, which gives you the +1 to all stats, and then the feat. But yeah, so Dragonborn, it's good because, you know, you get that +2 to strength and +1 to charisma, and the breath weapon gives you a little bit of extra utility, I guess you could say. So that's always good. Gnome, +2 to intelligence. Yeah, nah. Good. I'm not even gonna go into the other guys. Half elves are always good for just about anything. You can get +1 to strength/con, along with the advantage saves against charm. Again, it's a lot of that stuff that comes with being a elf, which is okay, but again, I'm telling you, man, like Dragonborn, dwarf, or half orc is probably the best ways to go. You get the half orc, gets that +2 to strength, +1 to con. Dark vision, proficiency with intimidation, which, you know, you just yell at things a lot, so that's good. So improved crit that stacks with brutal critical, and free daily use of relentless rage. So you can automatically see right there why being a half orc barbarian is outstanding, right? I mean, you know, I'm all for playing stuff against the classic trope, but I mean, it depends on what you're shooting for, role playing, or you're shooting for, you know, being a really good barbarian as far as like damage and taking it and everything of that nature, right? That's really what it comes down to. So breaking into the skills of barbarian, you get animal handling, you get athletics, intimidation, perception, and survival. Those are all great to have. Survival is good in some aspects. Perception is like, you take it. You find a way to get the perception to me. I just feel like you do it no matter what, because perception is like broken because you need it for everything. So that's really all I got on the barbarian as a whole. I hope you enjoy the video. We're going to be doing a little bit more. If I can do something to improve the video, let me know. That way I can do better, I guess. I know I say a lot, and I apologize for that because I really try not to, but as I'm trying to like kind of read my notes real quick and talk to you guys, it's kind of hard to do both. So I'm trying to keep the video rolling, and I guess I could probably edit, but I'm kind of new to the editing process, so bear with me on that, guy. And we'll be talking about the Bard next, so stay tuned and hope you enjoy.